Common chef discovers his food gives permanent buffs, and kings start warring over his recipes. I'm your anime, and let's go. Imagine being a regular cook in a small village, making simple meals to survive. When you accidentally discover that your food doesn't just feed people, it permanently enhances them. Strength that never fades, intelligence that keeps growing, skills that become permanent. Now imagine kings and emperors going to war, not for land or gold, but for your recipes. This is the story of Dante Rossi, who thought he was just a mediocre chef until his cooking literally changed the balance of power in the entire world and made him the most valuable person alive. Before we dive into this delicious journey of power and politics, smash that like button if you love stories where ordinary skills become extraordinary powers, hit subscribe because we cover the most creative power systems every week, and drop a comment telling me what permanent buff you'd want from magical food. Now let's get cooking. Dante Rossi is 32 years old and runs a small restaurant in the border town of Millbrook. The town sits between three kingdoms, making it a crossroads for travelers, but also a place nobody important ever stays. Dante's restaurant, The Humble Plate, serves basic food: stews, roasted meats, fresh bread, nothing fancy. He's not a master chef, never trained at a culinary academy, just learned from his grandmother who learned from hers. Simple family recipes passed down through generations. The food is good enough that locals eat there regularly, but not good enough to attract attention from food critics or nobility. Dante is fine with this. He makes enough money to live comfortably, has regular customers who've become friends, lives a quiet, peaceful life. That's all he wants. No drama, no adventure, just cooking and serving. On a Tuesday morning, a traveling merchant named Marcus stops by for breakfast. Orders the special, which is scrambled eggs with herbs, bacon, and fresh bread. Dante prepares it the same way he always does. Family recipe. Nothing special. Marcus eats and compliments the food. Says it's delicious. Pays and leaves. Standard transaction. Dante thinks nothing of it. 2 hours later, Marcus returns. He looks different, more energetic. His eyes are brighter. He's moving faster. He asks Dante what was in that breakfast. Dante lists the ingredients. Standard stuff. Eggs, butter, herbs, salt, pepper, bacon. Marcus shakes his head. Says it's not the ingredients. Says something happened to him after eating. He feels stronger, faster, more alert, like his body upgraded. Dante assumes the merchant is exaggerating. Maybe the food was just really fresh. Maybe Marcus was hungry and now feels better. That's normal. But Marcus insists. He's a merchant. He knows his own body. He travels constantly, carries heavy goods. And right now, he can carry twice as much as he could this morning, without getting tired. Something in that food changed him. Dante is skeptical, but curious. He asks Marcus to demonstrate. The merchant picks up a barrel that normally requires 2 men to lift. Picks it up with one hand, like it weighs nothing, sets it down gently. Dante's jaw drops. That's not normal. That's not possible. Marcus asks if Dante used magic ingredients. Dante says no. Everything was normal. Bought from normal suppliers, grown in normal farms, nothing special. Marcus says the food did something to him, made him permanently stronger. He can feel it. It's not temporary. It's not fading. He's actually stronger than he was. Dante doesn't know what to say. This doesn't make sense. Food doesn't permanently change people. That's not how cooking works. But Marcus is proof. Something happened. And Dante has no explanation. Over the next week, Dante experiments carefully. He makes the same breakfast for other customers, watches them. Most don't notice anything, but a few come back, report similar effects. One woman says she can suddenly do complex math in her head. Never could before. Now she can calculate trade profits instantly. Another man says his eyesight improved, doesn't need his reading glasses anymore, can see details from far away. A young boy says he learned to read overnight, just looked at books and understood. The effects are random, different for each person, but they're real, and they're permanent. Dante realizes something impossible. His cooking is giving people permanent buffs, like a video game. Eat the food, gain stats, keep the stats forever. He has no idea how or why. Nothing changed in his cooking. He's using the same recipes he's used for years, the same techniques his grandmother taught him. But somehow, his food is magical now. He tests this theory, makes a simple soup, serves it to a regular customer who's always been clumsy. The customer eats, returns the next day, says he hasn't tripped or dropped anything since yesterday. His coordination improved, permanently. Dante is cooking permanent enhancement potions disguised as normal food. and he doesn't understand how. He tries to replicate it intentionally, focuses on making someone stronger while cooking, serves the food to a farmer. The farmer eats, comes back the next day, says he broke his plow. It just snapped in his hands. He's too strong now, can't control his strength. The intentional buff worked. Dante can decide what buff to give. If he focuses on strength while cooking, the food grants strength. If he focuses on intelligence, it grants intelligence. If he focuses on dexterity, it grants dexterity. He's a walking permanent stat buffing machine. This is both incredible and terrifying, because if word gets out, everyone will want his food. Everyone will want permanent enhancements. And Dante knows from history that when everyone wants something one person has, wars start. He decides to keep this secret, tells the people he's buffed to not mention it, says he's experimenting and needs time to understand what's happening. Most agree. They're grateful for the improvements, don't want to cause trouble. But secrets in small towns don't stay secret. 2 months after discovering his ability, a noble from the Eastern Kingdom visits Millbrook. Lord Ashford. He's heard rumors. Whispers that a chef in this town makes food that permanently enhances people. He doesn't fully believe it, but he's curious enough to investigate. He dines at the humble plate, orders a full meal. Dante is nervous, decides to make the food normally. No intentional buffs, just good cooking. Lord Ashford eats, compliments the food, leaves. Dante breathes a sigh of relief. Maybe the noble didn't notice. 3 days later, Lord Ashford returns with guards. He's furious and ecstatic. He says the food worked. He ate 3 days ago and he's been getting stronger every day since. It's not stopping. It's still increasing, exponentially. Dante realizes what happened. He gave a buff unintentionally. And because he didn't set limits, it's still growing. It's compounding. Lord Ashford is getting stronger every hour. Will continue getting stronger indefinitely. That's not a buff. That's a curse, or a godhood path, depending on perspective. Lord Ashford demands the recipe, demands to know how it works. Dante says he doesn't know. It just happens. He can't control it fully. Lord Ashford doesn't believe him, threatens to take Dante by force, to make him cook for the Eastern Kingdom exclusively. Dante refuses. He's not a prisoner. He's a chef. Lord Ashford says he'll be back with an army. He's not asking anymore. He's taking. This is the moment Dante's life changes forever. He's no longer a simple chef. He's a strategic resource, a weapon, a prize. And kingdoms will go to war to possess him. Lord Ashford returns with 50 soldiers, surrounds the humble plate, demands Dante come peacefully, serve the Eastern Kingdom, receive titles, lands, wealth, just cook for the king, make the army stronger, win wars through permanent buffs. It's a generous offer. Most people would accept, but Dante knows what it means. He'll be a tool, a slave with fancy title. He'll spend his life in a castle cooking for soldiers, never free, never his own person. He refuses. Lord Ashford signals his soldiers to take Dante by force. But before they can move, the Western Kingdom's forces arrive. 50 knights led by General Helena. She heard about the situation. The Western Kingdom wants Dante too. They make a counteroffer. Better lands, more money, freedom to cook what he wants. Just make the Western army stronger. They'll protect him from the Eastern Kingdom. Dante is now being bid on by 2 kingdoms, like property, like a magic item. Before he can respond, the Southern Empire's delegation arrives. 100 soldiers, led by Prince Marcus himself. The Empire heard rumors too. They offer even more. A mansion, noble title, harem of servants, anything Dante wants. Just cook for the Empire. Make the Emperor's elite guard invincible. The 3 factions are now in a standoff, in Dante's small restaurant, each claiming the right to him, each threatening war if the others don't back down. Dante realizes the situation is about to explode. He does the only thing he can think of. He runs, uses the chaos to slip out the back, escapes into the forest behind town. The factions realize he's gone, start chasing, but Dante knows these woods, grew up playing here. He loses them in the dense trees, spends the night hiding, cold, scared. His peaceful life is over. He's now the most wanted person on the continent, not because he did anything wrong, but because he can make people permanently stronger. The next morning, Dante realizes he needs help, needs protection, needs someone who can keep the kingdoms away while he figures out what to do. He thinks of one person, the only person powerful enough to maybe help, the Adventurer's Guildmaster in the capital, a legendary warrior named Iron Scale Magnus. known for being neutral, for protecting those who need it. Dante starts the long journey to the capital, walking, hiding, avoiding roads. He knows the kingdoms are looking for him, has to be careful. Along the way, he realizes he's hungry, hasn't eaten since yesterday. He forages for ingredients, finds mushrooms, wild herbs, a stream with fish, makes a simple meal over a campfire, eats, feels the buff activate, realizes he just gave himself something, checks his body. He feels more resilient, tougher, like his skin is harder. He accidentally made himself more durable. Interesting, his power works on himself too. He experiments over the next few days, makes different meals with different intentions, gives himself strength, speed, enhanced senses. Each buff stacks, permanent, compounding. By the time he reaches the capital, Dante is no longer a normal human. He's superhuman, not combat trained, but physically enhanced beyond normal limits. He can run for hours without tiring, can see in the dark, can hear conversations from across streets. His body adapted to his enhancements remarkably. He finds the Adventurers Guild, a massive building in the capital's center, asks to meet Iron Scale Magnus. The receptionist laughs, says the guild master doesn't meet random people. Dante says it's urgent, life or death, about the kingdoms fighting over a chef. The receptionist's expression changes. She's heard about this. The situation is already causing diplomatic tensions. She agrees to pass the message. An hour later, Dante is brought to Magnus's office. The guildmaster is a mountain of a man, 7 feet tall, covered in scars, eyes like steel. He asks Dante to explain. Dante tells everything: the accidental discovery, the permanent buffs, the kingdoms demanding his service, the escape. Magnus listens without interrupting. When Dante finishes, Magnus asks one question: can Dante prove it? Can he demonstrate the power? Dante nods, asks for ingredients, cooks a simple meal right there in the office using a magical heating stone, makes a soup, infuses it with enhanced strength, offers it to Magnus. Magnus eats, waits. His eyes widen. He stands, flexes, says he can feel it, the power flowing into him, settling, becoming permanent. He's already the strongest human alive. Now he's stronger. He looks at Dante with newfound respect and concern. He says Dante is in more danger than he realizes. If the kingdoms are willing to fight over him, they'll escalate. This could start a continental war. Dante asks for protection. Magnus says the guild is neutral, can't take sides, but he can offer Dante a deal. Join the guild, become an official guild member. Then the guild has obligation to protect him. In exchange, Dante cooks for guild members occasionally, helps adventurers, makes them stronger for dangerous quests. Dante accepts immediately. It's the best offer he'll get. He becomes a guild member, gets official papers, protection, a room in the guild hall, and the freedom to cook what he wants. The kingdoms are furious when they find out, demand the guild hand over Dante. Magnus refuses, says Dante is guild member now. Attacking him means attacking the guild, and the Adventurers Guild has thousands of members across all kingdoms. You can't fight them without crippling your own adventurer workforce. It's a stalemate. The kingdoms can't take Dante by force without massive consequences, but they also can't let the others have him, so they resort to other methods. If you're hooked on this story about a chef whose cooking started a political crisis and want to see how Dante survives kingdoms literally going to war over his recipes, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because this gets absolutely insane. Trust me, wait until you see what happens when Dante accidentally creates a buff so powerful it breaks reality. Let's continue. The Eastern Kingdom tries assassination, sends elite killers to eliminate Dante. If they can't have him, no one can. The assassins infiltrate the guild at night, reach Dante's room, find him sleeping, move to strike. Dante wakes up. His enhanced senses warned him. He rolls out of bed as blades slice where he was. He's not a fighter, never trained in combat, but his buffed stats make him faster than the assassins expected. He dodges, runs, screams for help. Guild guards respond. The assassins flee, but one is caught. Under interrogation, he admits the Eastern Kingdom sent him. This is an act of war. The guild demands reparations. The Eastern Kingdom denies involvement, claims the assassin acted alone. Political crisis deepens. The Western Kingdom tries seduction, sends a beautiful princess to court Dante. She's charming, intelligent, genuinely likable. She spends weeks getting to know him. They become friends. She eventually proposes marriage, says she loves him. But Dante sees through it, asks if she'd marry him if he couldn't cook. She hesitates, just for a second. But that hesitation tells Dante everything. She loves what he can do, not who he is. He politely declines. The Western Kingdom is offended, withdraws their diplomats. The Southern Empire tries bribery, offers Dante everything. A palace, a kingdom of his own, a seat at the Imperial Council. Just cook for the Emperor, make him immortal. Dante asks if immortality is possible. The Empire's mages say theoretically yes. If Dante makes food that continuously regenerates health, permanently, it might prevent aging, might prevent death. Dante is terrified. He could make someone immortal. That's too much power. He refuses the Empire's offer. The Emperor is not used to being refused, declares Dante an enemy of the Empire, says anyone harboring him is also an enemy. The guild doesn't budge. Magnus makes a public statement. The Adventurers Guild protects its members, always. The Empire threatens to ban the guild from Imperial territory. Magnus says that's the Empire's choice, but good luck managing monster outbreaks without adventurers. The Empire backs down. They need the guild more than the guild needs them. But the tensions are at breaking point. 3 kingdoms, 1 empire, all wanting exclusive access to Dante, all willing to fight for it. The continent is on the brink of war. Dante feels the guilt. People will die because of him, because he can cook special food. He never wanted this, never asked for this power. He just wanted to run his restaurant. Magnus tells him it's not his fault. Power attracts conflict. Always has, always will. Dante's power is just more overt than most. The solution isn't to give himself up. It's to make himself less valuable through scarcity, or more valuable through necessity. Dante doesn't understand. Magnus explains. Right now, Dante is valuable because he's the only source of permanent buffs. If there were others, he'd be less of a target. Or if everyone needed him equally, no one could monopolize him. Dante asks how to achieve either. Magnus says the first option is teaching others. The second is making himself indispensable to everyone. Dante chooses the second. He can't teach his power, doesn't understand it himself, but he can offer his services to all kingdoms equally. Create a system where everyone benefits. No one has exclusive access. The guild helps establish the framework. Dante's Buff Buffet, a restaurant in neutral territory. Any person from any kingdom can visit. Order food, receive buffs. There are rules. Only 1 buff per person per month. No military personnel during wartime, no assassination attempts, or the kingdom responsible is banned. The price is contribution to the guild. Money, resources, information. The kingdoms are skeptical, but agree. It's better than war, better than no access. The restaurant opens. Demand is immediate and overwhelming. Nobles, warriors, merchants, scholars, everyone wants buffs. Dante establishes a lottery system. Limited slots per day, fair distribution across kingdoms. He cooks from morning to night, each meal carefully crafted, each buff intentionally designed. He gives a merchant improved charisma, helps negotiations, gives a scholar enhanced memory, helps research, gives a farmer improved stamina, helps work the fields. Every person he buffs is grateful. They spread stories. Dante becomes legendary, the chef who changes lives, the man who makes people better. His reputation shifts from weapon to benefactor. But not everyone is happy. Some nobles feel entitled to more access. Some kingdoms feel cheated that they can't monopolize him. Tensions remain, and some people start getting greedy. A group of rogue mages approaches Dante with a proposal. They want to study him, understand how his power works, replicate it, make buff food available to everyone. Dante is intrigued. If they succeed, he's no longer unique, no longer a target. He agrees to testing. The mages run experiments, magical analysis, blood tests, energy readings. They discover something shocking. Dante's power isn't in his hands or his mind. It's in his intent, his genuine desire to help people through food. That intent infuses the cooking process, creates a magical resonance that becomes permanent enhancement. It's emotion-based magic, extremely rare, and impossible to replicate artificially. You can't fake genuine caring. The mages are disappointed but enlightened. They report their findings. Dante is relieved. He can't be copied, can't be replaced, but also can't share the burden. He's stuck being the only one. Years pass. Dante's restaurant becomes an institution, a neutral ground where all nations meet. Conflicts are resolved over meals, treaties are signed in his dining room. He becomes more than a chef. He becomes a symbol of cooperation, of mutual benefit, but the pressure never stops. He ages, gets tired, realizes he can't do this forever. He needs a successor, someone to learn his recipes, maybe not gain his power, but at least continue the tradition. He takes on an apprentice, a young woman named Elena. She's passionate about cooking, wants to help people. Reminds Dante of himself before everything changed. He teaches her his family recipes, the techniques his grandmother taught him. She learns quickly, becomes skilled, but her food doesn't give buffs, doesn't have the magic. Dante realizes the power might die with him, unless he finds someone with the same gift, someone with intent-based magic naturally. He searches for years, tests dozens of cooks. None have it. He starts to accept that when he dies, the permanent buffs die too. But then something unexpected happens. Elena, after years of cooking Dante's recipes with genuine care, makes a breakthrough. She serves a meal to a customer. The customer comes back the next day, says they feel different, stronger. Elena gave a buff, not as strong as Dante's, but real, permanent, measurable. Dante is shocked, tests her food, confirms it. Elena has awakened the same power, not through inheritance, not through magic transfer, but through years of cooking with genuine intent to help. The power can be learned, can be passed on, just takes time, takes dedication, takes actual caring. Dante realizes this changes everything. He can train others, create more buff chefs, distribute the burden, reduce the target on his back. He starts a cooking school, teaches anyone who shows genuine compassion. Not everyone awakens the power. Most don't, but a few do. 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. It's rare, but it's possible. Over 20 years, Dante trains 50 chefs who can give permanent buffs. They spread across the continent, open restaurants in different kingdoms, each following Dante's rules: fair access, no favoritism, help people genuinely. The strategic landscape changes. No longer one person to fight over, now dozens. Can't monopolize them all. Can't go to war over any single one. The kingdoms adapt, accept the new reality. Use the buff chefs as resources, invest in them, protect them, support them. Wars over buff access become economically stupid. You'd destroy your own access trying to control others. Peace through mutual dependency. Dante retires at 60, hands his restaurant to Elena, lives quietly in a small cottage, cooks for himself, for friends. No pressure, no politics, just the joy of cooking. He reflects on his journey, how his simple family recipes changed the world, how accidental power led to political crisis, how crisis led to cooperation, how cooperation led to peace. His food literally made the world better, not just through buffs, but through forcing people to work together. Magnus visits him occasionally. They're old friends now. Magnus says Dante achieved something no warrior ever could. United kingdoms through necessity rather than conquest. Dante laughs, says he just wanted to cook. Magnus says the best heroes never wanted to be heroes. They just did what was right. And sometimes what's right changes everything. Dante dies at 78, peacefully in his sleep. His funeral is attended by thousands, nobles, commoners, kings, beggars, everyone he helped, everyone he buffed, everyone whose life he changed. They don't mourn, they celebrate. The chef who made everyone stronger, who proved that helping others is the greatest power. His legacy continues through the 50 buff chefs he trained, through the hundreds they'll train, through generations of people who learn that genuine care has magical power. That intent matters more than technique. That cooking can change the world if you do it for the right reasons. The kingdoms establish annual Dante Day, a holiday celebrating cooperation and mutual benefit. People cook for each other, share meals. Remember the chef who started it all. His original restaurant becomes a museum. His recipes are preserved. His story is taught in schools, not as history, but as philosophy, about power and responsibility, about fame and pressure, about staying true to yourself when the world wants to use you, about finding ways to help everyone instead of choosing sides. Dante's permanent buffs still exist in the bloodlines of people he helped. They pass down through generations, diluted, weaker, but present. A genetic gift from a man who cared. A century after his death, new buff chefs are common. The power is understood, taught systematically, no longer rare, no longer fought over. Just another profession, important, respected, but not worth wars. The balance of power stabilized, not through strength, but through distribution, not through conquest, but through cooperation. Dante proved the point, that the best way to have power is to share it, that the best way to be valuable is to be useful to everyone, that the best way to avoid being a target is to make yourself a necessity. The common chef who discovered his food gave permanent buffs and watched kings go to war over his recipes, who didn't become a weapon, didn't choose sides, but forced cooperation, created systems, trained successors, made sure his power outlasted him, made sure his power served everyone. That's the story, not of a chef who became powerful, but of power that learned to serve, not of kingdoms fighting over resources, but of resources that forced kingdoms to cooperate, not of one man changing the world, but of one man teaching the world to change itself, through food, through caring, through the simple act of cooking for others with genuine intent to help. That intent, that genuine desire to make people's lives better, turned out to be the most powerful magic of all, more powerful than armies, more powerful than kingdoms, more powerful than any buff he ever gave, because it spread, it taught, it transformed, not just individuals, but society. Dante Rossi, common chef, accidental world changer, proof that you don't need to be born special, you just need to genuinely care. The rest follows, the power awakens, the world transforms, and everyone becomes a little bit better, permanently. Real quick, before we get to the incredible epilogue about how Dante's legacy shapes the world centuries later, drop a like if you've been captivated by this journey of cooking and politics, subscribe so you don't miss more creative power system stories like this every week, and comment what permanent buff you'd want if you could eat at Dante's restaurant. Now let's see how this story ends. 300 years after Dante's death, his legacy has transformed society fundamentally. The buff chef system is integrated into every kingdom's infrastructure. Children with intent-based magic are identified early, trained, supported. They become pillars of their communities. Cooking schools teach not just technique, but philosophy, the importance of genuine care, of intent, of cooking to help rather than to impress. These lessons spread beyond cooking to all professions. The idea that genuine intent to help makes your work more powerful, that caring about outcomes improves outcomes. It sounds obvious, but before Dante, it wasn't formalized, wasn't taught, wasn't magical. Now it is. Historians study Dante's impact, write papers about how one person with unusual power could have destroyed the world, could have been weaponized, could have caused eternal war. Instead, through choices, through systems, through training others, he created peace. They teach his decisions as case studies, how to handle sudden power, how to avoid being weaponized, how to distribute rather than hoard. Students learn that power without wisdom destroys, that value without accessibility creates conflict, that uniqueness without succession is unstable. Dante demonstrated all the right choices, not perfectly, not immediately, but eventually, and that's what mattered. The Buff Chef Guild, descended from Dante's cooking school, has chapters in every major city. They maintain standards, ensure ethical use of power, prevent abuse. Anyone can request a buff, but frivolous requests are denied. The power is for genuine need, to help farmers feed families, to help scholars solve problems, to help warriors protect people, not for vanity, not for dominance. This ethical framework, established by Dante and maintained by successors, prevents the arms race everyone feared. If buff chefs only help defensive purposes, offensive wars gain no advantage. Kingdoms can't get stronger armies through buffs, but they can get healthier populations, more productive workers, better educated citizens. The incentive structure shifted from conquest to development, from external expansion to internal improvement. Dante's restaurant, preserved as historical site, still operates, not giving buffs anymore, but serving Dante's original recipes, unchanged. Tourists from across the world visit, taste the food that started everything. It's delicious, simple, honest, just like Dante was. The irony is that Dante's food, even without buffs, taught an important lesson. That simple things done well, with care, with genuine intent, are more valuable than complex things done carelessly. That the quality of your work matters less than the care you put into it. That people can taste the difference between food made with love and food made mechanically. This philosophy spread beyond cooking. Craftsmen work with pride. Teachers teach with passion. Healers heal with empathy. The idea that intent matters became cultural, And culture shaped by Dante's philosophy is measurably better. Lower conflict, higher cooperation, better outcomes. Not perfect, never perfect. People still fight, still compete, still have conflicts, but the baseline improved, the foundation shifted, and that shift traces directly to a chef who cared about feeding people, who accidentally discovered his caring had power, who chose to spread that power rather than hoard it. 1,000 years after Dante, his story becomes myth, legend. Some doubt he existed, say the records are exaggerated, that permanent buffs from intent-based cooking is too perfect, too convenient, too thematically neat. But the buffs still exist, still work, still help people. And the earliest documented source is Dante Rossi's restaurant in Millbrook. The archaeological evidence is undeniable. The genetic buffs and bloodlines trace back to his era. The cooking techniques match his documented style. He was real, did exactly what the stories say. Changed the world by caring enough to cook food that made people permanently better. That legacy doesn't fade, can't fade, because it's not just history. It's infrastructure, it's profession, it's philosophy. It's woven into how society functions. Remove Dante's influence and civilization restructures. His impact is that fundamental, that lasting, that real. The common chef who discovered his food gave permanent buffs, who watched kings go to war, who forced cooperation through fair access, who trained successors to spread the power, who turned accidental gift into systematic good, who proved that genuine care is the most powerful force in the world. His story doesn't end. It continues in every buff chef cooking with intent to help, in every person who learns that caring about your work makes your work better, in every society that chooses cooperation over conquest, in every moment when someone decides that helping others is more valuable than helping yourself. Dante didn't just make people stronger, he made the world better, not through power, but through generosity, not through uniqueness, but through training others, not through exclusivity, but through accessibility. He had ultimate power, the ability to permanently enhance anyone, and he chose to share it, systematize it, make it available. That choice, more than any buff he ever gave, changed everything. Because power that serves everyone isn't really power, it's service. And service, genuine service, builds better worlds than dominance ever could. That's Dante's real legacy, not the buffs, but the lesson. That the best use of power is helping others gain power. That the best way to be valuable is making others valuable. That the best way to change the world is teaching the world to change itself. The chef who could have been king, who chose to be teacher, who trained 50 chefs who trained thousands more, who turned one person's gift into everyone's benefit, who proved that ordinary people with extraordinary abilities can choose extraordinary generosity. And when they do, when they genuinely choose to help, the world remembers. The world honors, the world learns, and the world becomes a little bit better, permanently. Just like every buff Dante ever gave, the enhancement was permanent, the caring was genuine, the legacy is eternal. That's the story of Dante Rossi, common chef, world changer, proof that cooking with love can literally transform reality, that caring about people creates magic, that genuine intent to help has power beyond comprehension. His recipes are still used, his philosophy still taught, his choice to share rather than hoard still shapes civilization. 1,000 years later, 10,000 years later, forever. Because some stories don't just entertain, they teach, they inspire, they change how people think about power and responsibility. Dante's story is one of those. The chef whose food gave permanent buffs, and whose choices gave permanent lessons. About generosity, about cooperation, about using power to serve rather than dominate. Those lessons will never fade, will echo through eternity, will remind every generation that ordinary people can change the world, not through conquest, but through caring, not through hoarding power, but through sharing it, not through being special, but through making others special too. That's real power, that's lasting impact, that's the legacy of Dante Rossi, forever. But there's a darker chapter in Dante's story that needs to be told. A chapter about when his power was almost weaponized despite all his precautions. When Dante was 42, a rogue faction within the Western Kingdom attempted a coup. They called themselves the Ascendancy. They believed that buff chefs should rule, that people with power to permanently enhance others were natural aristocracy, destined to lead. The ascendancy had secret members, including 3 buff chefs that Dante personally trained. They approached him, said the current system was wrong, that buff chefs were servants when they should be masters, that they had ultimate power and should use it to reshape society. Dante was horrified, said power didn't give right to rule, that their ability was meant to serve, not dominate. That thinking otherwise betrayed everything he taught. The ascendancy members said Dante was naive, that he could have been king of all kingdoms, could have ruled the continent, could have made himself immortal god-emperor. Instead, he ran a restaurant, wasted his potential. They wouldn't make that mistake. They planned to buff themselves and their followers to superhuman levels, create army of enhanced warriors, overthrow existing governments, establish buff chef aristocracy, rule through power. Dante tried to stop them, argued, pleaded, warned. The ascendancy didn't listen. They left, started their plan, began buffing their followers in secret, creating enhanced soldiers. Dante reported them to Magnus, to the kingdoms, to anyone who would listen. But the ascendancy was careful, operated in shadows, denied everything, built their force quietly. 6 months later, they struck, attacked the western capital, 2,000 enhanced soldiers against normal guards. The fight was massacre. Enhanced soldiers were too strong, too fast, too durable. They took the palace in hours, captured the king, declared new order. The ascendancy announced their manifesto. Buff chefs were superior beings, would rule for everyone's benefit, would enhance loyal citizens, eliminate dissidents, create perfect society through selective buffing. It was eugenic nightmare, tyranny justified by power. Everything Dante feared. The other kingdoms mobilized, prepared for war. But how do you fight army that gets permanently stronger with every meal? Magnus came to Dante, asked the impossible question. Could Dante create debuffs? Food that weakened people permanently? That removed enhancements? It went against everything Dante believed. His power was meant to help, to make people better, not worse. But the alternative was letting ascendancy win, letting his power be used for tyranny, proving that buff chefs couldn't be trusted. Dante spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with the decision. His power could remove buffs. He'd never tried, never wanted to, but theoretically possible. Intent-based magic worked both ways. Finally, Dante agreed, but with conditions. He'd create debuff food, but only targeted, only removing buffs he personally gave, only affecting ascendancy members, not civilian use, not military weapon, just tool to stop coup. He worked with Magnus, with kingdom alchemists, with master chefs, created dishes that reversed his buffs specifically, that identified enhancements from his signature and nullified them. It took weeks, required complete understanding of his own magic, but he did it. The counteroffensive began. Special forces infiltrated ascendancy territory, poisoned their food supply with Dante's debuff meals. Not poison in traditional sense, just reversal. The enhanced soldiers ate, felt their buffs fade, felt strength return to normal, speed become mundane, durability disappear. They panicked, thought they were dying. Some fled, some surrendered, some fought desperately. But normal soldiers could fight normal opponents. The ascendancy crumbled. Without their enhanced advantage, they were just rebels, were defeated, leaders captured. The 3 buff chefs who started it were brought before Dante. They expected execution, expected revenge. Dante did something unexpected. He forgave them, said they were his students, his responsibility, his failure for not teaching them better. He testified on their behalf, asked for mercy, life imprisonment instead of execution, time to reflect, to understand why they were wrong. The kingdoms granted his request, partially. The 3 buff chefs were imprisoned, but their power was removed. Dante created special debuff that targeted their ability itself, made them normal chefs, no more buffs. They couldn't weaponize their power, couldn't teach it, couldn't use it. This sparked controversy. Was removing someone's ability ethical? Was it punishment or amputation? Different than death penalty? Dante admitted it was a terrible choice, but necessary. Said he'd rather remove the power than kill the person. That they could still live, still cook, still find meaning, just not with magic. The 3 former buff chefs reacted differently. One became bitter, spent life in prison angry. Another found peace, became prison chef. made normal food that brought comfort without magic. The third went mad, couldn't accept the loss. The variety of responses showed the complexity. That power was part of identity, that losing it was traumatic. But that life continued. This incident led to establishment of Buff Chef Ethics Council, independent body that monitored buff chef behavior, investigated abuses, had power to recommend removal of abilities in extreme cases. Dante chaired the first council, established guidelines, made removal of power absolute last resort, required unanimous vote, required proof of intent to abuse, required attempts at rehabilitation first. The system wasn't perfect. Some buff chefs escaped judgment, some were punished too harshly, but it was better than nothing, better than letting power run unchecked. The ascendancy incident taught crucial lesson, that even Dante's philosophy wasn't foolproof, that some people with power would always try to dominate, that systems needed enforcement mechanisms, needed consequences. Dante incorporated this into his teaching, told students about the ascendancy, about former students who betrayed principles, about the price of arrogance. Every buff chef learned what happened when you thought power made you superior, when you forgot you were servant not master, when you believed enhancement ability justified dominance. The lesson was visceral, real, scary. It worked. Buff chef misconduct became extremely rare. Not zero, never zero, but rare enough that the profession maintained trust, maintained respect, maintained social license to operate. Dante's willingness to create debuffs, to police his own profession, to hold students accountable, proved buff chefs could be trusted, that they'd stop their own if needed. That power wouldn't be abused without consequences. This made kingdoms more comfortable with buff chef presence, made people feel safer, made the entire system more stable. But it cost Dante something profound. He'd created weapon, the debuff food. It existed now, could be replicated, could be used. He destroyed his notes, destroyed the samples, tried to make it disappear, but he knew it was too late. The concept existed. Others could figure it out, could create their own debuffs. The genie was out of bottle. He lived with that guilt, that fear, that knowledge that he'd created tool for destruction to stop destruction, that sometimes good required becoming what you feared. The incident aged him, gave him nightmares, made him question everything. Magnus found him one night years later staring at his hands, asked what was wrong. Dante said his hands had created food that helped millions, but also created food that harmed, that removed power from people. That turned gift into curse. Was he still good person? Did good deeds outweigh bad? Magnus said morality wasn't accounting, wasn't balance sheet. Dante made hard choice in impossible situation, prevented tyranny, saved thousands. The means were terrible but necessary. That's what leadership requires sometimes, doing terrible, necessary things. Dante wasn't sure he agreed, but he accepted it. Accepted that his legacy included both enhancement and reduction, both giving and taking, both creation and destruction. The duality haunted him, but also completed him, made him wiser, more humble, more aware of complexity. He stopped being idealist, became pragmatist, still believed in helping people, still dedicated to service, but understood that service sometimes required hard choices, required compromises, required accepting that perfection was impossible. This wisdom made him better teacher. He stopped presenting buff chef work as pure good, started presenting it as responsibility with moral complexity. Students learned there were no easy answers. That power required constant vigilance, that good intentions weren't enough. This created generation of buff chefs who thought critically, who questioned themselves, who didn't assume their work was automatically good, who considered consequences, who planned for abuse, who built in safeguards. They were more careful than previous generation, more thoughtful, more effective because they anticipated problems. Dante's mistake, his darkness, his compromise, made his students better than he was. That was his pride and his pain. At 60, Dante received letters from the imprisoned former students. 2 letters. One was from the buff chef who found peace. He thanked Dante, said losing his power was best thing that happened, that he'd been addicted to enhancement ability, drunk on power. Removing it freed him. He found meaning in normal cooking, in making food that comforted without changing, in simple human connection. He was happy now, happier than when he could buff. The second letter was from the buff chef who went mad, written before his death by suicide. It was bitter, accused Dante of playing God, of deciding who deserved power, of being hypocrite. If buff chefs shouldn't rule, why did Dante get to decide who kept abilities? The letter ended with curse, that Dante would know guilt forever, would never find peace, would die knowing he destroyed someone's soul. Dante read both letters, the gratitude and the curse, both from people he taught, both from people he removed power from, both true in their own way. He kept both letters, read them whenever he felt too proud or too guilty. They reminded him that his choices had consequences, that helping meant harming, that there was no clean path, only best path available. This complex legacy is what made Dante's philosophy so robust. It wasn't naive optimism, it was hard-won wisdom, tested by betrayal, tempered by compromise, refined by guilt. When buff chefs today recite Dante's principles, they're reciting words written by someone who made terrible choices for good reasons, who lived with consequences, who accepted complexity. That makes the principles stronger, not weaker, because they're not theory, they're practice, they're survival, they're what actually worked when tested by reality. Dante's life wasn't perfect, his choices weren't all good, but his willingness to make hard choices, accept consequences, and learn from everything, that's what made him great. Not his power, not his skills, his character, his ability to grow, his refusal to let mistakes define him while still accepting responsibility for them. That's the full story of Dante Rossi. Not sanitized, not simple, but true. The chef whose food gave permanent buffs, who watched kings war over recipes, who forced cooperation, who trained successors, who faced betrayal, who made terrible necessary choices, who carried guilt, who found wisdom, who built something that lasted, not because he was perfect, but because he was real, human, flawed, trying his best, making mistakes, learning, growing. That humanity, that honesty, that complexity, that's what made him trustworthy. That's what made his legacy credible. That's what made people follow his example. Because it was achievable, not superhuman perfection, just human excellence. Doing your best with what you have, making hard choices when required, accepting consequences, learning, growing, that anyone can do, that everyone should try. That's the real lesson. Not about food or buffs or kingdoms. About being human with power. About staying human despite power. About using power without letting it define you. Dante proved it's possible. Proved it's worth the cost. Proved it creates lasting good. Not perfect good. Not simple good. But real, sustainable, meaningful good. That's enough. That's everything. That's the legacy worth inheriting. The common chef who discovered uncommon power, who made uncommon choices, who created uncommon legacy through common virtues, persistence, honesty, service, growth. Those virtues applied consistently changed the world, not through magic, through character. The buff food was catalyst, but character was cause. Character created systems. Character trained students. Character made hard choices. Character carried guilt. Character kept trying. That's what mattered. What worked. What lasted. And that's what every generation learns from Dante Rossi. That character matters more than power. That choices matter more than abilities. That legacy is built through daily decisions to do right thing even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That lesson echoes through centuries. Will echo through millennia. Because it's true. Proven. Demonstrated. Lived. By a chef who just wanted to cook good food. Who accidentally gained godlike power. Who chose to stay human anyway. Who showed that being human, truly human, honestly human, flawed and trying human, is the greatest power of all. That power creates lasting change. Real change. Good change. The kind of change that makes the world measurably better. Permanently. Just like every buff Dante ever gave. The enhancement was permanent. The lesson was profound. The legacy is eternal. Common chef. Uncommon power. Extraordinary choices. Universal lessons. That's Dante Rossi. That's his complete story. The darkness and light. The success and failure. The power and responsibility. The growth and cost. All of it. True. Real. Inspiring. Forever. There's another crucial period in Dante's life that shaped his philosophy profoundly. The years he spent learning the true limits and capabilities of his power through experimentation and sometimes painful discovery. When Dante was 35, after his restaurant system was established but before the ascendancy crisis, he became obsessed with understanding his ability at fundamental level. He worked with the kingdom's top magical researchers, submitted to tests, analysis, experiments. They discovered things that shocked everyone. First, his buffs had no theoretical upper limit. He could stack them infinitely on a single person, each meal adding to previous enhancements. A person could eat his food daily and become godlike over time. This was terrifying. It meant anyone with consistent access could become unstoppable, could transcend humanity entirely. The researchers wanted to limit this. Dante refused, said his power responded to intent, not rules. He couldn't arbitrarily cap it, but he could choose not to stack buffs intentionally, could space them out, could refuse to over-enhance anyone. Second discovery was more disturbing. His buffs were inheritable. Children of buffed parents carried diluted versions of enhancements. This meant his work was changing human genetics, creating new baseline. Over generations, humanity would evolve, become stronger, smarter, better, or worse, depending on which buffs proliferated. This revelation caused existential crisis. Dante wasn't just changing individuals, he was changing species, directing human evolution, playing God with genetic code. He stopped cooking for 2 months, couldn't reconcile the weight. Magnus found him in this state, asked what was wrong. Dante explained the genetics, the evolution, the God playing. Magnus asked if the changes were harmful. Dante said no. They were improvements, just permanent, species-altering, irreversible. Magnus said evolution happens anyway, through natural selection, random mutation, environmental pressure. Dante was just adding another factor, intentional improvement. Was that worse than random chance? Dante didn't know, wrestled with it, eventually decided that improvement was better than stagnation, that if his buffs helped people live better lives, the genetic inheritance helped their children too. But he established new rule. No buff combinations designed to create specific genetic outcomes, no eugenic planning, no intentional breeding programs, just individual enhancements that happened to pass down. The distinction felt important even if the outcome was similar. Third discovery was strangest. His power could affect more than humans, could buff animals, plants, even objects in certain ways. He tested this carefully, made food for a horse. The horse became faster, stronger, more intelligent, enough to understand complex commands, made fertilizer for crops. The plants grew larger, produced more, resisted disease. The food grown from buffed plants carried trace enhancements. People eating them got minor benefits, made polish for a sword. The weapon became sharper, more durable, never dulled. The wielder gained minor skill bonus just from holding it. This expanded Dante's impact beyond direct feeding. His influence could spread through agriculture, through animal husbandry, through crafting, through any application of his intent-infused work. The implications were staggering. He could terraform, could improve entire ecosystems, could make regions more productive, more sustainable, more livable. But again, the weight, the responsibility, the God playing. He made decision. Would buff crops in disaster zones, would buff livestock for struggling farmers, would buff tools for disabled craftsmen, would use expanded power for charity, for necessity, not for profit, not for dominance. The kingdoms pressured him, wanted him to buff their crops, their horses, their weapons, offered fortunes. Dante refused, said those weren't emergencies, weren't true needs, were just desires for advantage. This created resentment. Some kingdoms felt cheated. They couldn't access his full capabilities, only got what he deemed worthy. But Dante held firm. His power, his choice, his moral framework, can't force him, can't compel him, can only ask and accept his answer. This principled stance cost him. Several kingdoms banned his restaurants, declared him hostile for refusing service. The bans didn't last. Citizens wanted buff access too badly, but the tension remained. Some leaders hated that they couldn't control him, couldn't command him, could only request. The fourth discovery was most personal. Dante could buff himself, could make himself superhuman, could stack enhancements until he transcended mortality, could become effectively immortal, ageless, invincible. The temptation was enormous. Who wouldn't want eternal life, perfect health, ultimate power? Dante tested it cautiously, gave himself minor buffs, improved health, better stamina, sharper mind. The effects were intoxicating. He felt amazing, thought clearer, moved easier, wanted more, started planning, could buff himself daily, become strongest being alive, live forever, watch his legacy unfold across centuries. Then he stopped, realized what he was becoming. Realized immortality meant watching everyone else die, meant being alone forever, meant losing humanity, meant becoming something else. He reversed the buffs, created debuff food, removed his own enhancements, returned to normal. It was painful, like losing part of himself, but necessary. He needed to remain human, to stay grounded, to remember mortality. He established rule for himself. No self-buffing except medical necessity. No enhancements for vanity. No pursuit of transcendence. Just normal human lifespan. Normal human limitations. Normal human experience. This decision influenced his students, showed them that power should be resisted sometimes, that having ability didn't mean using it, that choosing limitation was strength, not weakness. Many buff chefs followed his example, refused to enhance themselves, stayed normal, stayed human, stayed mortal. But some didn't. Some buffed themselves extensively, became superhuman, lived centuries, became effectively immortal. Dante didn't judge them, said it was personal choice, but he noted they seemed lonely, seemed disconnected, seemed to lose touch with human concerns, seemed to prove his point without him saying it. These 4 discoveries, these 4 choices, shaped modern buff chef ethics. The understanding that power must be self-limited, that ability should serve genuine need, not desire, that staying human matters more than transcending humanity, that choosing mortality is wisdom, not foolishness. Every buff chef learns these lessons, studies Dante's experiments, understands the temptations, makes their own choices. Most choose Dante's path, choose service over power, choose humanity over transcendence, choose mortality over eternity. Not because they must, but because they see the cost. See what immortal buff chefs become. See the isolation, the disconnect, the loss of meaning, and choose differently. This voluntary restraint, this cultural norm of self-limitation, is what makes buff chefs trustworthy. They could be gods, choose to be servants, could live forever, choose to die with dignity, could transcend, choose to remain. That choice, repeated by hundreds of buff chefs across generations, creates culture of humility, of service, of humanity. It's Dante's most important legacy. Not the buffs, not the restaurants, not the systems, but the demonstration that power is best used sparingly. That ability is best applied to others. That transcendence is trap. That humanity is treasure. These lessons weren't taught through lectures, through books, through rules. They were taught through Dante's lived example, through his choices, through his demonstrated values. Students saw him refuse to enhance himself, refuse to pursue immortality, refuse to transcend, and learned that refusing power was more powerful than using it. That restraint was more impressive than excess. That staying human was harder and better than becoming God. This created buff chef culture completely unlike other magical professions. Mages pursued power. Warriors pursued strength. Nobles pursued influence. But buff chefs pursued service, pursued humility, pursued humanity. All because Dante showed them it was possible, showed them it was valuable, showed them it was meaningful. One student once asked him why. Why choose mortality when immortality was possible? Why choose limitation when transcendence was available? Why stay human when you could be God? Dante answered simply, said being human was the point, the challenge, the meaning. That transcending humanity meant abandoning what made existence worthwhile. Struggle, growth, connection, loss, love, death, all of it. Without mortality, nothing matters. Without limitation, nothing is earned. Without humanity, nothing is real. The student understood, chose mortality, chose humanity, chose meaning over power. That student became one of the greatest buff chefs in history, not through power, through wisdom, through choosing well, through understanding what Dante understood, that the best use of ultimate power is not using it, that the greatest strength is restraint, that the highest calling is service. These truths, discovered through Dante's experimentation, tested through his choices, proven through his life, became foundation of buff chef culture, became the reason society trusts them, became the source of their real power. Not the buffs, but the trust. Not the magic, but the wisdom. Not the ability, but the character. Dante discovered he could be God, chose to remain chef. That choice changed everything. Made buff chefs respected rather than feared. Made their power acceptable rather than threatening. Made their presence welcomed rather than restricted. Because everyone knew, buff chefs could transcend, choose not to, could dominate, choose not to, could pursue immortality, choose mortality instead. That voluntary restraint, that demonstrated wisdom, that chosen humanity, earned trust no amount of power could. And trust, Dante learned, was more valuable than any buff he could give, more powerful than any enhancement, more meaningful than immortality. Because trust creates cooperation. Cooperation creates peace. Peace creates prosperity. Prosperity creates meaning. And meaning, the ability to live life that matters. That's what everyone really wants. Not strength, not intelligence, not immortality, but meaning, purpose, connection, life that means something. Dante's buffs gave temporary advantages. His choices gave permanent meaning. The buffs made people stronger. The meaning made them better. And better, Dante learned, mattered more than stronger. Always had, always would. The chef who could have been God, who chose to remain human, who showed that humanity was the real superpower, that choice, that demonstration, that lived proof. That's what changed the world. Not the magic, the morality, not the power, the principle, not the ability, the wisdom to not always use it. That's Dante Rossi's complete legacy. Power and restraint, ability and wisdom, magic and mortality. All of it, held in balance, demonstrated daily, proven eternally. The common chef who discovered uncommon power, who made uncommonly wise choices, who created legacy that transcends any buff through being determinedly, intentionally, profoundly human, despite every temptation to be more. That's strength, that's wisdom, that's the lesson, forever. In Dante's final years, something unexpected happened that brought his story full circle. At 75, 3 years before his death, Dante received a visitor, a young chef from Millbrook, his hometown, the village where his original restaurant stood. The chef's name was Paolo, 19 years old, Dante's great-nephew, grandson of Dante's younger sister. Paolo came with a request. He wanted to reopen the Humble Plate, Dante's original restaurant, restore it, run it exactly as Dante once did, serve simple food to locals, no buffs, no magic, just honest cooking. Dante was surprised, asked why. Paolo said he'd grown up hearing stories about great Uncle Dante, the legendary buff chef who changed the world. But Paolo's favorite stories were about before, about simple restaurant serving simple food, about chef who cared about feeding his neighbors, about life before fame and power and politics. Paolo wanted that life, wanted to be normal chef in small town, wanted to cook because he loved cooking, not because it gave buffs, not because it was important, just because. Dante understood completely. That was the life he'd wanted too. Before everything changed, he gave Paolo his blessing, his old recipes, his grandmother's techniques, everything from before the buffs. Paolo returned to Millbrook, restored the old building, reopened the Humble Plate exactly as it was 50 years ago. Simple menu, fair prices, good food, no magic. The locals loved it. They remembered the original, remembered Dante before he became legend, welcomed the return to normalcy. Word spread. People made pilgrimages to eat at the restaurant where it all began, to taste the food that made Dante famous. Except it wasn't that food. This was the food from before. Normal cooking, no enhancements, just skill and care. Some visitors were disappointed, expected magical food, expected permanent buffs, got excellent normal meal instead, but others understood, saw the point. This was a reminder that Dante's power wasn't the important part. His cooking was, his care was, his genuine desire to feed people well. That existed before buffs. That's what made the buffs meaningful. Paolo sent Dante updates, photos, stories. The restaurant was thriving, people coming from across the continent, not for buffs, for authentic connection to legend's roots, for a reminder that great things start small, start simple, start with caring about doing one thing well. Dante visited once, quietly, didn't announce himself, sat in the corner, ordered the stew, his grandmother's recipe, exactly as he remembered, exactly as he used to make. Before the magic, before the power, before everything. He cried, quietly, not from sadness, from completion, from circle closing, from reminder of who he'd been, before the world made him something else. Paolo recognized him eventually. The whole restaurant did. They wanted to celebrate, to make it event. Dante asked them not to, said he was just customer, just old man enjoying good food. Let him eat in peace. They respected that. Let him be. Let him finish his meal. Let him pay like everyone else. Let him leave quietly. Dante never returned to Millbrook, but he sent Paolo letters, recipes, advice, not about buff cooking, about normal cooking, about running small restaurant, about serving community, about finding meaning in simple work. Paolo treasured these letters, shared them with culinary students. They revealed different side of Dante, not the legend, not the philosopher chef, not the world changer, just uncle who loved cooking, who remembered his roots, who valued simplicity. These letters were published after Dante's death. Letters to a young chef, Dante Rossi's final lessons. They became unexpected bestseller. People expected buff techniques, system wisdom, political philosophy. Instead, got meditations on chopping vegetables, on respecting ingredients, on feeding people with love, on finding satisfaction in craft itself. Critics called the book disappointing, said it wasn't about Dante's real work, missed the point entirely, but working chefs loved it. Normal cooks without magic. They saw themselves in it, saw validation that their work mattered, that cooking without buffs was still worthy, still important, still meaningful. Paolo kept the humble plate running for 40 years, eventually passed it to his daughter, who passed it to hers. 5 generations later, the restaurant still operates, still serves the original recipes, still maintains Dante's vision of simple food made with care. It's become shrine, not to power, to simplicity, not to magic, to craft, not to legend, to humanity. People visit not to see where Dante gained power, but to see where he was human, where he was just chef, before the world needed him to be more. This parallel legacy, this reminder of normalcy, became crucial counter-narrative to Dante's power story. It proved he wasn't always legend, wasn't always important, wasn't always world-changing, was once just cook, just person, just someone doing job he loved, and could have stayed that way, would have been happy staying that way. The power was accident. The importance was thrust upon him. The legend was built by others. At his core, he was always just Paolo, just chef who wanted to feed people. The humble plate represents that truth, preserves it, teaches it to every generation, reminds them that Dante's greatness wasn't his power, was his character, his choices, his willingness to stay human despite power, to remember his roots despite fame, to value simplicity despite complexity. Every buff chef visits the humble plate during training. It's pilgrimage, rite of passage. They eat the food, the normal food, the powerless food, and remember that's where it started, with caring, with craft, with desire to feed people well, not with buffs, not with magic, not with world-changing power, with simple human desire to do good work. That lesson, that grounding, that connection to origin keeps buff chefs humble, keeps them focused, keeps them human, because they've literally tasted where it began, understood that buffs were addition to cooking, not replacement for it. That power enhanced existing care, didn't create it. This understanding prevents arrogance, prevents entitlement, prevents belief that power makes them special. They're special because they care. Power just amplifies existing virtue. Without virtue, power is meaningless. The humble plate teaches this wordlessly, through experience, through taste, through connection to Dante before he was Dante the legend, when he was just Dante the chef, and visitors leave understanding what made Dante actually great, not power, humanity, not ability, character, not magic, care. That's the final lesson, the one that completes the story, that Dante's journey was never about gaining power, was about staying human despite it, about remembering who he was, about valuing what mattered, about choosing meaning over might. The common chef who discovered uncommon power, who became uncommon legend, who never forgot he was common person, who valued that commonality, who protected that humanity, who taught that being normal, being human, being simple was strength, was wisdom, was the point. The humble plate stands as monument to that truth. Simple building, simple food, simple message. You don't need power to matter. You don't need magic to be important. You don't need to be legend to make difference. You just need to care, need to try, need to do your work with genuine intent to help. That's enough. That's everything. That's what Dante proved. Through power and through absence of it. Through fame and through returning to roots. Through lifetime of choices. All pointing to same truth. Humanity is the superpower. Everything else is just details. The chef whose food gave permanent buffs, whose choices gave permanent lessons, whose humanity gave permanent inspiration. That's Dante Rossi. Complete, complex, contradictory, human, perfectly imperfectly human. And that's why his legacy lasts. Not despite his humanity, because of it, forever. And so the story of Dante Rossi ends where it began, in a small restaurant, serving simple food, made with care. The circle completes, the journey finishes, the legend becomes human again, but the impact remains. Thousands of buff chefs carrying his lessons, millions of people carrying his genetic enhancements, billions influenced by systems he created, entire civilizations shaped by choices he made, all because one common chef discovered his food did something impossible and chose to handle that impossibility with wisdom, with care, with humanity. The world is measurably better for his existence, more cooperative, more peaceful, more enhanced, not perfect, never perfect, but better, incrementally, permanently, better. That's all anyone can hope to achieve. That's all that matters, making things a little better, leaving world improved, creating legacy that helps. Dante did that, through cooking, through caring, through refusing to let power corrupt, through choosing service over dominance, through building systems that lasted, through training successors who excelled, through staying human when transcendence tempted, through remembering his roots when fame elevated, through dying mortal when immortality beckoned. All of it, every choice, every decision, every moment, pointed towards same truth, that common people can do uncommon good, that ordinary abilities can create extraordinary impact, that simple virtues create complex legacies, that humanity is strength, that caring is power, that choosing to help, genuinely help, changes everything. Dante Rossi proved it, lived it, died believing it. And the world, forever altered by one chef who cared enough to cook food that made people permanently better, remembers, honors, learns, that caring matters, that character matters, that humanity matters, more than power, more than magic, more than anything. The common chef, the permanent buffs, the warring kings, the legendary choices, the eternal legacy, all of it teaching one lesson, that you don't need to be special to make a difference. You just need to genuinely care. The rest follows. The power awakens. The world changes. The legacy endures forever. That's Dante Rossi. That's his complete story. From beginning to end, from common to legendary back to human, from simple restaurant to world systems to simple restaurant again. The circle complete, the lesson clear, the legacy permanent, just like every buff he ever gave. Enhancement that never fades, impact that never ends, truth that always matters. Caring changes everything. Power amplifies caring, but caring is the source. Always was, always will be. Common chef, uncommon power, extraordinary choices, universal truth, forever.